Hi, it's me, the guy who thought this wig was a good idea. It doesn't even look like the person this video's about. On May 12, 1970, David Andrew Roy White was born in Dodge City, Kansas, to a Mennonite pastor father. At the age of 19, he moved to Hollywood with dreams of becoming an actor, and actually found some success, with lots of guest spots and a recurring role on the Burt Reynolds sitcom Evening Shade.
I'm still a little bit cloudy on this transvestite thing. Could you...
But after a few years, feeling low while struggling to find work, David believes he realized that God's purpose for him in this world was to bring people to Christ through the art of film, and thus began his now decades-long career of producing and starring in faith-based movies. All of which I sat down and watched, because I wanted to see if consuming the entire portfolio of an artist whose worldview I assumed to be completely different from mine causes me to realize that the two of us are more similar than I might think. And also because, I have self-destructive tendencies. But before we begin, I need to establish a few ground rules. I only watched every Christian movie starring Mr. White. So if it wasn't a Christian movie or he had a supporting role, I didn't watch it. So as much as I'm sure that I would have enjoyed Murder Cycle,
this is ground zero for the invasion.
Murder Cycle.
it will tragically go undiscussed in this video. Secondly, as luck would have it, I already made a video 2 years ago talking about David's first ever Christian movie, Second Glance.
Hey, Scotty. Jesus, man.
And if you expect me to waste any breath talking about that movie again when there are 27 other movies to get to, you must hate me. If you want, you can go back and watch that video, recorded during the brief period I was trying out a mustache. Now with that out of the way, let's not waste any time. Movie number 1, End of the Harvest.
Is this the philosophy club headquarters, where all the atheists hang out?
You mean hell? So this one tells the story of a group of Christian college guys who have a bit of a rivalry with their school's philosophy club, which is full of atheists.
Just because you can't see God, it doesn't mean he's not there.
Todd, do you see my girlfriend standing here in front of me? Oh, you don't see her? Oh, hey, just because you don't see her doesn't mean she doesn't exist.
And that may sound like a self-own, but check again, bitch. I'm asexual. The main atheist, Derek, is actually played by the same actor as Doug, the unsaved bully character from Second Glance.
Hey, Burgess, can we cheat off you in that English test today?
Hadn't planned on it, Doug.
Which reminds me that I should mention, there are a lot of recurring actors in these movies other than David A.R. White, most of whom I'll probably forget to mention. But just saying, if you think you notice the same faces appearing over and over again in all these clips, know that you are correct, they are. Anyway, one thing this movie does that I really like is it makes clear all the atheist philosophy club guys don't respect women because, like, they have girls in their room.
Oh, I'm sorry to bother you, Derek. I didn't know you had company.
And they say things like,
Sandra Bennett.
Wait, Bennett? The campus prostitute?
Because as we all know, no one has historically had more respect for women than Christian fundamentalists. But the whole movie is building up to this lecture that White's character gives to the philosophy club about this study he read that supposedly proves the apocalypse predicted in the Bible is imminent.
Come on, Matt. We need a good laugh. Let's hear these great passages.
And this is one of the arguments that he provides.
God judged the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, right? Because of the rampant sexual sin, homosexuality, and perversion there. Sounds like today, doesn't it? He wiped out those cities and only 3 people survived.
Whoa, what an insane thing to say. That 1995, when this movie came out and takes place, was a time of rampant sexual sin, homosexuality, and perversion. And nobody in the scene, including the atheists who have been arguing with him the whole movie, say a word against this. It's just unanimously agreed upon as a good point, I guess. And then last thing I want to talk about in regards to this movie is its weird ending. See, throughout the movie, White's character has been having these dreams of an old man in a wheat field handing him a sickle. Then at the end of the movie, following his lecture, a woman who attended it claims to be the widow of the man who wrote the study it was about. She shows David a picture of the guy and, oh, it's the guy from his dreams. I guess implying the guy is passing on to David the responsibility of bringing people to Christ before the imminent end times.
The harvest is coming to an end, Matt.
Do all you can to share the message of Christ.
I understand.
Crazy. I rated this movie 4 out of 10, but know that my ratings are based on how fun these movies were to watch, not on how much they're like quality pieces of cinema, because otherwise they'd all get zeros. Movie number 2, The Moment After.
They are not theories, it's the truth.
Now, this is the first of several of these movies that directly deals with the concept of the rapture, which, for those fortunate enough to not know, is an end times event some Christians believe to be prophesied in the Bible, where all the followers of Christ and children will be zapped up to heaven, leaving everyone else to fend for themselves in the world below as it unravels into chaos. Now listen, I try to be an open-minded guy. I don't think that everyone who identifies as Christian is a bad or unintelligent person, but if you're part of the group that believes in the rapture, that one day everyone belonging to your religion is gonna get yeeted up to heaven while everyone else is punished, to put it kindly, you're stupid and I don't like you. But in The Moment After, White portrays an FBI agent in a world dealing with the aftermath of a rapture-like event, where one day a huge portion of the population miraculously disappeared. And don't worry, they make it a point to tell you that Jewish people do not count. Believing in the God of Abraham isn't enough. You need to fuck with the Father and the Son to get raptured. White's character starts out as a non-believer, but as he slowly realizes the similarities to the biblical end times events, he's brought to Christ, even becoming a government fugitive for his new faith. Now, believe it or not, there actually were a few scenes in this movie that managed to elicit some emotion out of me. Like this non-Christian lady discovering her entire family has disappeared. But it's also so harsh when you realize this movie's basically saying that she deserved to have something so awful happen to her because she wasn't part of the right religion. There's also a small plot point that in this post-rapture era, the world's governments are demanding people get microchips implanted.
We ask that every citizen receive the biological chip introduced in Europe earlier this year. As you know, this B chip will ensure that all of your monetary credits are properly logged and accessible.
Is this movie the origin of all those anti-vax conspiracy theories about the government wanting to implant us with microchips? As if they would need to fool us into allowing them to track us, instead of just making the tracking device capable of playing videos of the Costco guys. Also, this is the first of these movies where David's character is shown to have a black best friend.
You wash, I'll dry.
No. I'll dry.
Which is worth mentioning because it is the beginning of a long pattern. But my big takeaway from this movie was just wondering if the people behind it, like David A.R. White, really believe the rapture is gonna happen. So much so that they feel the need to make a movie warning people about it. Because if so, that's seriously insane. 3 out of 10, it was mostly really boring. Movie number 3, Mercy Streets.
Take me out to the ballpark. Take me out to the game.
So get this, in Mercy Streets, David A.R. White plays twin brothers. Estranged since childhood, one of them grew up to be a pastor and the other a hardened criminal. And I'm sorry, there's just no world where somebody with David A.R. White's facial features is capable of breaking into a car. He just has too powerful youth pastor energy. But when due to some criminal shenanigans, the brothers switch places, the result is, honestly, one of the more entertaining of these movies that I had to watch. It wasn't too preachy and honestly just felt like a normal, cheesy, made-for-TV movie. There are some fun moments of the criminal brother failing to blend into the pastor brother's life.
Please, give money to help inner city kids.
Okay, good. Now, all of you, show me your saddest faces. Come on, sadder. This is important.
There's a scene where the pastor brother is being explained a counterfeiting scheme by the crime boss who kind of like breaks the fourth wall and freezes time.
Here's the appetizer. See, this is the first trick. It's the only full stack in the pile.
The brothers fight each other at the end, like Captain America in Endgame.
What'd you do to her?
Oh, and it also features the second of David A.R. White's character's black best friends.
Look, I think you're going to be a great preacher. Once you get out of that head of yours and let God move you, you're the vehicle He uses to touch people. Trust Him. Get out of the way. Stop being so Jeremiah about everything.
Overall, though, surprisingly watchable, 7 out of 10. Number 4, Bells of Innocence.
I am to deliver the Redeemer to the Master.
It belongs to me.
So in this one, White plays a pastor and father, get used to that, who, in trying to deliver Bibles to Mexico with 2 other Christian guys, finds himself stranded in a creepy Wild West-esque village that turns out to be
Puerta de la Santana. A gateway to hell, Pastor.
And I don't know, they battle the demons. Chuck Norris is actually in this as some sort of angel. God, imagine if your career went from starring alongside Bruce Lee to David A.R. White. That's gotta be rough. And he doesn't even do any martial arts in this movie. He mostly just battles using his angel powers. I'm not gonna lie, this one was pretty disappointing. Like, you hear low-budget Christian movie starring Chuck Norris as an angel battling demons, and you expect it to be a really entertaining hate watch, but this was just really boring.
They belong to us! It is written! It is written!
Did you see that?
It did get me thinking, though, kind of like with the Rapture, is this something these people really believe could happen? Where a ghost town is taken over by demons who have fantasy battles with angels? Like, you imagine the plot involving demons has something to do with them being Christians, right? Because otherwise, why go with demons over anything else? Vampires, zombies. I think on some level they believe that demonic occurrences like this are an actual threat in this world, and not everybody has Chuck Norris to protect them.
This is not over, Matthew.
I know it's not over, Joshua, until God decides it's over.
Really lame, 3 out of 10. Movie number 5, 6, The Mark Unleashed. But I guess if you count Second Glance, this is really the 6th movie, so that works out. So this one is not in continuity with the moment after. As far as we can tell, the rapture hasn't happened in this world. But it does take place in another alternate dystopian future where the government's making everyone get microchips implanted in them.
I can't force you to take the implant. Every time I tried, people either died instantly or went bananas.
At least they say it's dystopian, but as a result of, I'm guessing, the movie's budget, things look pretty normal, especially when they're outside. Okay, so real quick after recording, I learned some added context to the whole recurring plot point of microchips being implanted in people in these movies. Basically, in the Book of Revelations, which is like the book in the Bible that has the most end times prophesizing, it mentions something called the Mark of the Beast, which is like interpreted as in some point in the future, before Jesus comes back and the world ends, lots of people are gonna get something on their arm or on their forehead that basically like marks them for Satan, for the dark side, for the Antichrist. And it's also mentioned that people won't be able to buy or sell anything unless they get this mark. So these movies are interpreting that as a microchip that's being implanted in people that Christians know better than to get because it's the mark of the beast.
They had not worshipped the beast or his image, and they had not received his mark on their foreheads or on their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years.
A lot of people apparently thought that the COVID vaccines were the biblical mark of the beast coming to fruition. And I obviously disagree. I do not think that's true, but it is pretty funny that, like, I could see if you're the type of person that believed the mark of the beast was coming, how it did kind of seem that way. Like, it goes in your arm, and I guess it did kind of keep you from buying things for a minute. Also, I love that evangelical Christians' idea of a dark, scary, dystopian future is one where everyone's gay and has access to free birth control.
In the community, you are truly free to move among partners, male or female, as you choose. Your pleasure will be your guide.
But some people in this world refuse to get microchipped, like Christians and even some non-believers like David A.R. White's character, who just thinks it's wrong. And the rebellious non-chipped people who are placed in prisons and forced to wear Dickies branded jumpsuits. Good to know that even in the worst timelines, the Dickies brand endures. One of the bad guys in this movie also seems kind of queer-coded to me.
It's nice to work with someone like you. The Christians are so annoying. The whole time that you're torturing them, they're forgiving you.
And he's the bad guy, because flamboyant men are evil, and manly men, like David A.R. White, are good. So in prison, White meets a prophet played by Stephen Baldwin, who straight up seems evil, both because of his performance and because a lot of what he says is scary.
That's right, I know that somewhere deep down inside of you, there's a piece of you that's screaming. There's a piece of you that's begging you to hear me so that you don't go to hell. You know why you're laughing? It's because you're scared.
Like, all of his arguments as to why somebody should convert to Christianity can be boiled down to, you go to hell if you don't.
You know that hell exists. And that sadly, that's probably where you're going to end up.
And I don't like that so many people do this, like scaring people into being religious. Like, do you really want that being the reason people join your religion? Because they're scared? As opposed to them just liking what the religion has to say? I'm just really turned off by the interpretation of Christianity that this movie presents. Like, there's this guy who willingly goes to his execution because he's just so sure that he's about to be in a sick afterlife with his savior.
Those who trust in the Lord are like Mount Zion, which cannot be shaken but endures forever. But to those who reject your ways, bring judgment.
And I couldn't help but think that's what everyone at Jonestown was thinking before their deaths, man. Not to be all Reddit atheist, all religions are cults. I know there are positive aspects to religion. Like that preacher who called out Trump to his face, she was cool. I just don't think any of religion's positive aspects are really on display here, or in any of these movies, really. But at the end, White is captured and tortured into getting the microchip, and it's like a sad, bleak ending.
It was the wrong choice.
5 out of 10. So weird, it was kind of fun to watch at times.
That is a crock, and you know it.
Movie number 6, The Moment After 2, The Awakening.
That'll be $19.99.
Please, just once, please. I'm really hungry. No, don't do that. Don't do that, please don't.
That turned out to be an accurate prediction as to how people act when you try and pay with cash nowadays. But yes, finally, a sequel to The Moment After. I'll get answers to all the questions I had after the first one. Honestly, don't have much to say about this one. We learned that in addition to the black Christian friend David A.R. White had in the first one, he had another.
Like I said, bro, some pretty trippy stuff in here.
So 2 black guys tried to tell David A.R. White about Christianity before the rapture happened, and he didn't listen to either of them. They're racist. This is also the first of these movies to feature actress Andrea Logan, David's eventual wife, and later, ex-wife. Ooh, scandalous. I only mention this because she's in a lot of these movies going forward, and it must just be kind of awkward having a ton of movies out there starring you and your ex. Like, girls get mad at me when they find out I still use my ex's Netflix password. But anyway, in this movie, they meet on a commune, but unfortunately for David, she's married. But then her husband dies for some reason I can't remember, and he's gotta act all sad, even though you know he's thinking, yes, competition eliminated. And then this movie ends with the bad guy, whoever that was, seemingly dead before his eyes open Avatar style. Leaving things open for a moment after 3 that I'm sorry to report was never made. I know, I'm still dealing with it myself. 3 out of 10, pretty boring, man. Movie number 7. Hidden secrets. So this one is like a dark comedy where David and all his friends return to their hometown for the funeral of their childhood friend, where the dead friend's grieving sister is David's first love and ex. I know, seems like the perfect opportunity for their love to rekindle, but uh-oh, David's there with his new girlfriend. And I feel there's some ego on display here, right? Like David A.R. White produced this movie, and the main plot is two women fighting over him. There's also a scene between those two women in the bathroom where they are talking about lipstick that just screams written by a man.
I like that shade. Thanks. Passionate pink. No way. Look. Passionate pink.
What do women talk about to each other when they're alone? Let me see. They wear lipstick. The more women wear lipstick than men, so probably lipstick. But yeah, everyone in this movie is dealing with some flaw or hidden secret, as the title suggests. Well, everyone, of course, except for David A.R. White, who's perfect and gets all the girls.
I don't deserve him.
But there's one guy who they say once struggled with homosexuality, but apparently doesn't anymore.
And when I came to the Lord, it was like a miracle. I was freed of my homosexuality. But to be honest, now I still struggle in my mind, you know? You can't imagine how hard it is. It is so difficult to remain celibate in this world today.
They also imply, I think, that this character was touched as a child.
I'm sorry about what happened to you when you were a kid.
Oh, come on, I'm way over that. Yes. Oddly enough, though, I find it easier to forgive him than to forgive myself.
Kind of an unnecessary detail, I'd say. Maybe this is a reach, but I kind of feel like they included that to imply that that happening to him is the reason he's gay. Like as if that's how gay people are created. I don't like it. Also, the main love interest character is revealed to have had an abortion.
Why on earth would God want to punish you?
I murdered my own baby.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but this movie does, so it of course has to make a whole big deal about the fact that despite doing that objectively horrible, awful thing, she's still forgiven in the eyes of Christ.
And what, you think that this is something that God can't forgive? Doesn't it say in Scripture that the blood of Jesus, his only son, is good enough for all sin?
But also, like, don't do that shit again. Lastly, there's this character who's like really judgmental to everyone for not being a good enough Christian.
Okay, abortion is the American Holocaust. More babies have been killed in this country than Jews in Germany. Their blood cries out for judgment.
Rhonda.
But God will not be mocked.
And I gotta give the movie credit, it does call out her behavior as problematic and even cites people like her as the reason many are driven away from Christianity.
We all know that you mean well. Okay, you love God, and God knows that. But it's those kind of words that drive people away from Christianity, Rhonda. It's those kind of words that rob people of their hope.
Which is a good point, but also the people behind this movie make other movies about the rapture. So, what else? There's a scene where David sings and like zero effort was put in to actually make it sound like it's his voice.
Look at my heart again.
There's a shopping montage that I remember being fun. But overall, this one was really strange. 2.5 out of 10, because I can now award half points, I just decided. Movie number 8, In the Blink of an Eye.
Rap. You say that like it's a dirty word. Must be the people we met who listened to it.
So in this one, David is a cop or something with a black partner, of course, and after the two of them save the life of a pop star, them, along with their wives, are invited onto the singer's yacht. But see, after White's wife, again played by his actual ex-wife, Andrea Logan, is converted to Christianity by the partner's wife, this leaves David as the only non-believer out of the four. So that later, when you guessed it, the rapture happens, his wife and best friend both disappear, leaving him behind. And his best friend's wife, but I don't think he was as torn up about her. Then a little bit later, the day resets Groundhog Day style, with David as the only one with any memory of how things unfolded before. And basically the rapture keeps happening and the day keeps resetting until he realizes he needs to give himself to Christ.
The heavens are smiling, David. Congratulations.
We are commanded by God to love even the unlovely.
Meaning he can finally get raptured with the others, which I guess is a happy ending. Funny detail though, David has a cross tattoo in real life that is seen in this movie, but since his character starts out as a non-believer, they have to include this interaction.
I must be getting to you, brother. You got the tattoo of that cross on your arm there.
It's a dagger. I keep telling you, it's a dagger.
Stupid! 3 out of 10, it was really preachy and just boring. Movie number 9, Holy Man Undercover.
If you wanted documentaries, it had the Discovery Channel. And if you wanted fiction, it had CNN.
Okay, this one is noteworthy because it's a comedy loosely based on David A.R. White's life story. Only instead of leaving his Mennonite community for Hollywood, they made him Amish for the movie. White again plays 2 characters, not only his self-insert Roy, but also Roy's quirky Uncle Brian.
What's that? Oh, it's, medicine. What's wrong?
Nothing. You take it before you feel bad.
And it's not that funny of a performance, but I have to give him credit for really trying to make it one. Like, he puts his whole David A.R. White tussie into playing that uncle character.
I managed to slip 2 Peter 4:10 into a spot once.
2 Peter 4:10? I thought there were only 3 chapters.
What are you doing? You trying to blow my cover? Hide it! Hide it!
I'm not gonna hide the word of the Lord, Brian.
Go to the back of the line!
But once Roy gets to Hollywood, it's basically an elf-like fish out of water story where he gets cast on a TV show playing Satan, a TV show that's produced by his love interest, of course played by his actual ex-wife. You know the trope of youth pastors always bringing up how hot their wives are?
My wife will always come first. Oh, man, she is hot. Stand up, babe. Everyone look at her.
I feel this movie makes David A.R. White kind of like the final boss of youth pastors because he made a whole movie about how hot his wife is.
Warning bells should have been going off. I should have spent more time praying about this decision. But looking at her, how could I say no?
Another surprising thing is that this movie actually managed to be funny occasionally.
Now I was beginning to understand those health films they showed us in high school.
Like, it never had me dying laughing or anything, but it at least garnered a few nose exhales, which, trust me, as someone that's now seen all this guy's movies, is an achievement. Not all of the humor lands though, like there's a scene where Roy and the uncle go to a car wash run by some gentleman who, I don't believe to be the most delicate portrayal of Mexican people, let's just say.
Hey, what's up, man? My name is Pinky, and this is the Thumb. You want the Tuesday Super Sud Special? What?
And if that's not bad enough, it turns out that the car wash is just to launder their cocaine dealing, and when the cops show up to bust it, they shoot and kill all the guys, and it's just played off as funny. But because this movie managed to be funny often enough to keep me entertained...
Now, God knows that we mess up. We all do. But I bet there's nothing that you've done that I haven't done myself.
I had impure thoughts about Mr. Rogers.
I still feel I have to give it a 7.5 out of 10. Movie number 10, Run On. I was debating whether or not to include this one in the video at all because it's not really a movie, it's just a professional recording of a live event where David and 2 other guys do stand-up / storytelling about their lives. And I decided as a compromise that I would just watch David's segment of it, seeing as this whole video is kind of a case study on him. So, fun fact about me, pretty big fan of stand-up comedy. Personally think it's the most difficult and impressive art form that one could excel at. So I don't really understand why you would want to try something that's already so difficult when you know you're also gonna have to make your material inoffensive to an evangelical Christian audience.
There are 40 people in my graduating high school class. Statistically, that meant that there were going to be 18 happy girls, 18 happy boys, 2 unhappy boys and 2 potentially happy boys.
Was that about gay people? What's also sad is that the live audience in this special doesn't even seem to be that into it.
Have you ever tried being Jesus doing the Sermon on the Mount in mime?
But later in his section, David starts to recount a time in his life where even he started to question his faith. And as he goes through some reasons that someone may start to pull away from Christ, he gets really mad, and it scares me.
I was the Son of God, specifically called for a purpose. But what do you do when you can't see that purpose anymore? You start wondering. You start thinking too much.
Hold on. Thinking too much? Listen, if you're admitting that arguments in favor of your religion don't hold up when people think too much about them, you should probably get some new arguments, my brother in Christ. I mean, in general, like historically, isn't discouraging people from thinking something that mostly bad people do? Anyway, I'm not gonna rate this one because I didn't even watch the whole thing, but it was so strange that I was almost entertained. You're aware that this video isn't something that a mentally stable person would make, right?
Movie 11, Jerusalem Countdown.
You've always denied the existence of the spiritual realm, but now you are about to come face to face with how very real it is.
Me briefing my wife for her first Sasquatch expedition. This was a really lame action movie that got me thinking, who is this for? What small niche group of what must be elderly Christian men want to watch an action movie, but feel they can't watch any actually good ones, and are so deep in their delusions of what is and isn't considered Christian that they'll only allow themselves to watch fucking Jerusalem Countdown? That one's okay. St. Peter will be chill with that one, but if I watch Die Hard, I'll end up blowing a demon for sure. Anyway, I don't really remember what happens in this movie, just that White plays an FBI agent again, and that the plot was extremely, big on Israel. They mentioned Israel a lot in a very positive way.
The America you know will be part of history, and unable to protect its friends.
What friends?
Israel.
And you know, I don't feel that I'm an educated enough individual to properly criticize the politics of this movie, especially in relation to, you know, recent world events. But let's just say their politics, I'm pretty sure I disagree with. Free Palestine. Also, at the end, the rapture happens. Because that's something these people are really, really concerned about. 2.5 out of 10. Movie number 12, Marriage Retreat.
Wives, submit to your husbands.
3 couples go to a retreat in the wilderness to work on their marital issues. David and his wife, obviously, then one where the husband is like a gambling addict, and one where the husband's a successful TV actor. Now, you may have noticed I haven't mentioned any of the wives' careers, and that's because they don't have any. They don't have careers or distinct personalities. But honestly, the men really don't either. In fact, everyone in this movie kinda acts like a child.
I got a bad feeling about this.
This is so not what I signed up for.
This is actually pretty good. Now, the issue going on in White's marriage is that she's ready to have kids, but he's not. And this is his reasoning.
When they drop out of school, join the circus, flirt with socialism, and the next thing you know, they're exchanging gunfire with the FBI all over TV.
The thing he's worried about most is his theoretical children becoming socialists. The guy who runs the marriage retreat also has the most intense voice ever, like he'd be a great villain.
Hold it right there. Don't use the Bible as a shield to hide behind to suit your argument. No man has the right to quote the Bible unless he's ready and willing to commit to living that life.
but a lot of the advice that he gives the couples is based in scripture, meaning it also has a lot to do with gender roles. So I don't really know if I'd agree with any of the marriage advice that's provided here. But I can't say for sure because I don't really remember any of it either. And again, it's just kind of awkward that these people starred in a movie together about saving their failing marriage, yet they couldn't do that in real life. And I'm not judging them for ending their marriage, mind you, just for making all these movies together. Not much to say about this one. 3 out of 10. 13. Encounter. Paradise Lost.
So when your friend Louise invited you to do heroin with her, you couldn't say no. You told yourself you couldn't get hooked the first time, especially if you snorted it.
So this is apparently a sequel to a 2011 film just titled The Encounter, but David only has a leading role in its sequel, so that's all that I watched. But here he's playing another FBI agent. Man, working with the FBI has gotta be a big fantasy for him, who during a hurricane becomes trapped inside with a colorful cast of characters. This includes the cartel leader David was after, his heroin-addicted wife, a married couple grieving the recent loss of their son, and this guy, who is quite literally Jesus.
I'm Jesus. Christ.
Yeah. And I'm the Virgin Mary.
Now there's historically inaccurate depictions of Jesus, and then there's this high school drama teacher looking fuck. But anyway, all these people have something preventing them from letting Christ into their lives. For example, with the cartel leader's wife, it's partly that she was raised in a Buddhist temple.
Mimi spent time in a monastery where she was taught that all pain and suffering were illusions. Isn't that right, Mimi?
In other words, with a different religion. But as Jesus explains to her,
Mimi, I am Jesus. And I'll never tell you that you're not hurting when you really are.
Your religion's not all bad, like there are some okay parts, but it mostly misses the mark, so you know, I'd cut that shit out. And again, talking up your religion I'm fine with, but having to explicitly say why it's better than every other belief system? Come on, man.
And unlike what you learned at that monastery, I won't force you to suffer through 1,000 lifetimes of war and sorrow and death.
But yeah, this movie is big on people finding Jesus right before they die, so they don't go to hell. Like, it's never too late. Like, the cartel leader ends up dying, but since he accepted Christ right before, it doesn't even matter that he profited off people's addiction to a deadly substance his whole life. He still gets to kick it with JC forever, with a snazzy new hat. I guess that was like his welcoming present. This also heavily emphasizes the belief that everything on earth is a test for heaven. Like, that's pretty much the whole point of this life, is to secure the correct afterlife. I think Jesus at one point even refers to earth as like a fallen world.
But if you could see what he's seeing now, if you could feel what he's feeling, you wouldn't even dream of calling him back to this fallen world. Not even for a second.
And that's like one of my least favorite interpretations of Christianity, I'd say. That all that really matters in this life of sin we live down here on earth is to score enough points to make it into heaven. But also those points don't really matter because regardless of what you do, if you accept Christ before you die, you'll make it anyway, with a cool new hat. For those reasons, I'm gonna give this one a 2 out of 10. But I also wrote down that I was really depressed the day I watched it, so no, that might have unfairly informed the score.
It's me again.
When it comes to women, there's always a catch.
Okay, so here he's a pastor and father again, but this time, his wife's not played by his real-life wife. Uh-oh! Perhaps an omen of their impending divorce. She is in the movie, though, just as a different character. But anyway, he's having a bit of a midlife crisis, questioning his life choices. So naturally, he prays to God for help. I wish my family was dead. No, he just asks God for guidance, and it's given to him in the form of him waking up in the bodies of a bunch of other people and one fish. So he gets to see what life is like as people like a mean rich guy and a drug-addicted model played by Andrea, and it causes him to realize his real life wasn't that bad. Okay, so in this movie, when he's in another person's body, he sees his body as himself, but when he looks in a mirror, the reflection is the other person, what everybody else sees. And that got me wondering, when he's possessing the bodies of women, assuming that all these characters are cisgendered, what would happen if he tried to touch his dick? Would his hand pass through it like a ghost? I find it extremely disappointing that this goes unanswered in the movie. But anyway, he then gets to be a fish, an elderly matriarch, then his daughter's like jerk boyfriend, who he finds owns like Playboy magazines, and he's all,
I knew you were trouble.
and it's like, David, weren't you a teenager at one point? Because then you'd know that if not a magazine, it'll just be the black cat on his Marvel poster. That might have been too specific an example. So the idea, I think, is that the elderly matriarch is the only person's life he experienced that seemed like a fulfilling one, so he realizes he shouldn't regret getting married and starting a family. Basically, it's God saying, you want a different life? Okay, well, this is what different lives are like. They all suck. As if the only alternative lives to husband and father are the ones presented here. Like, there are people that can't be those things and still live happy lives. But I don't know. This movie doesn't really offer any solutions to David's depression, in my opinion. Just that he should be grateful for what he has and that it could be worse.
I spent the last few years thinking that I missed out on something, that somehow life would have been better if I had chosen another road. It took a miracle, April, to show me that there's nobody that I'd rather be than me.
And you know, that's not really advice. That wouldn't help if he's feeling unfulfilled. And I'm not suggesting that he should abandon his family to start a breakdancing career or anything, but maybe like see a therapist at least? Start a hobby? After waking up from his fantasy, he tries to help all the people whose lives he briefly inhabited, including his daughter's boyfriend.
The music you listen to, magazines you read, you can't help but look at women as things.
Hey, in his defense, maybe that's only because the Bible told him to. Oh, also, I liked the best friend character in this movie, unironically. He has like a best friend that's like a movie buff and helps David out during the body switching, and I enjoyed how supportive this guy was of his buddy.
Would it be weird if I asked you out? I mean, technically you're not you anymore, and we have a...
I watched this one with my buddy post-edible, and it was so goofy, I kind of enjoyed it, 6 out of 10. But we're officially past the halfway mark, and I've only had 7 manic episodes as a result. I'm honestly impressed with myself. Película número 15, Hermano Blanco. Also, yes, I'm aware, I got new glasses partway through recording. What do you think?
Look here, white boy!
So I've really been dreading this one because, well, look at the poster. David A.R. White might be the last person whose opinion I'd ever want to hear on the topic of race relations. I just didn't expect there to be any way I could get through this one without cringing so hard my spine breaks and I have to spend the rest of my days in a vegetative state. Luckily, it wasn't quite that offensive. Not saying it was an accurate and insightful deconstruction of the Black experience or anything, but you know, I still have basic motor functions after watching it, so gotta give credit where it's due. David plays a mega church pastor named James White, who is relocated with his family, including his wife, again played by Andrea, to a small, struggling, predominantly black church in Atlanta.
Can you feel the Holy Spirit coming up on inside of me?
And even though the people that attend that church aren't so sure of him at first, after he helps prevent the church from closing down with a big fundraiser, they realize this white boy might not be so bad after all. Really, the most problematic thing about this movie is just that it's a white savior story to the extreme. The black church could only be saved when a literal white man came into town. A tired, problematic trope, yes, but that I can handle when I know they could have made David rap or something if they wanted. I'm grateful. 5 out of 10. 16 Revelation Road, the beginning of the end. So the Revelation Road movies, plural, seem to be the result of David and his colleagues wanting to make their own version of Mad Max. Only better, because they're Christian and rated PG-13. David plays a father and traveling bulletproof vest salesman who ends up in some beef with a powerful biker gang. But unfortunately for them, David is ex-military and was even experimented on Winter Soldier style, so he like doesn't feel pain and is an amazing fighter. I can't get over him coming up with this badass perfect character for himself to play. Like, this series is literally just a middle-aged Christian man's self-insert Mad Max fanfiction, and I just think that's so cute. The only thing not perfect about his character is that he's not a Christian.
Look, I know it's not your thing, but, will you pray with me?
Yeah, no, babe, it's just not my thing.
And I'm pretty sure that's only so he could continue to be a part of the story after halfway through this movie. Say it with me now. The rapture happens! Also, this is another one where Andrea's in it, but not playing his wife. She's like the daughter of the evil head of the biker gang, I think. Oh, also, the guy who plays Jesus in The Encounter also plays him in this.
The light came down. It took them.
And what is the light?
I don't know, God.
I'd suggest that means they take place in the same universe, but David plays a completely different character in this one, and there can't be two David A.R. Whites unless it also takes place in the same universe as Mercy Streets. 6 out of 10, I guess? Number 17, Revelation Road 2, The Sea of Glass. The only thing I remember happening in this one is at the end he fights a guy with a giant hammer.
No!
4 out of 10. 18, God's Not Dead. So this movie and its sequels are, I believe, David A.R. White's biggest claim to fame due to them being distributed in theaters and having some success. And I know that they've been covered to death in countless other YouTube videos, but I've never watched them myself before. And I was curious to see if they really deserved the complete dog pile of internet hate that they seem to get. And you know, when I finally sat down to watch the first God's Not Dead, I have to say, it wasn't what I expected. It was worse. Easily the worst one so far, which if you've been watching this long, you'll know is saying something. So, the main plot of this movie revolves around a Christian college student named Josh, played by Spencer from Good Luck Charlie, the two-timing pig. He has an evil atheist philosophy professor who asks that all students taking his class write down the phrase "God's not dead" on a piece of paper.
This semester I propose that we refuse to waste our limited time together debating the existence of the big man in the sky, the myth of a benevolent, all-powerful, supernatural being. All that I require from each of you is that you fill in the papers I've just given you with 3 little words: God is dead.
But when Josh bravely refuses, the professor challenges him to convince the class of God's existence through a series of guest lectures. So first of all, I don't think a college professor would ever do this. Can't speak for everyone, of course, but most of the college professors I had were intelligent, open-minded individuals who were accepting of other people's worldviews. And I don't think that they would ever want to potentially alienate some of their students like this. In fact, I don't think I've ever personally met somebody that hates Christianity as much as the professor in this movie does. Like, he's really out to ruin this kid's life for being one.
You know, I also checked up on your declared major, pre-law. What exactly is pre-law? We don't award degrees in that. Don't bother answering. But know this. If you truly feel a need to continue with this charade, I will make it my personal mission to destroy any hope of a law degree in your future. Have a nice day.
This just isn't a real thing that happens in this country. But a whole movie being based around it makes me think that some people are under the delusion that it does. Now, you may be wondering where our main man David A.R. White factors into the story. Well, he plays a local pastor named David Hill, because for his highest profile movie, he wanted to make sure his character had his real name. And he basically helps a bunch of characters in the movie who are all struggling with faith in a variety of ways. In addition to Josh, there's a girl who was raised Muslim whose father, after discovering her listening to the Bible on audiobook, physically abuses and disowns her.
He's the one God who has not begotten. Say it. I command you to say it.
No, Mama, Jesus is my Lord and Savior, and he died to save me from my sin. No!
I don't like that the one character in this movie of a different religion is portrayed as violent and mean. The end of the movie is crazy though. Not only does Josh convince his entire class of the existence of God, he convinces them to such a degree that they all stand up and cheer.
God is not dead.
God's not dead.
God's not dead. God's not dead. God's not dead. God's not dead. God's not dead. God's not dead. God's not dead.
Like it's a goddamn everyone clapped story on Tumblr. Then later, the evil professor gets hit by a car, and who's there to rush to his aid but Pastor Dave?
Do you know Jesus?
I'm an atheist.
I believe it's God's mercy that brought me here right now.
Who immediately makes sure to convert him to Christianity before he dies, you know, so he doesn't go to hell.
Do you accept him as Lord and Savior?
Yes, I expect.
Imagine a stranger's dying in your arms, and you have such a myopic view of existence that you think the best thing you can do for him in that moment is convert him to your religion? What a jackass. Luckily, he does convert the professor right before he bites it.
It's all right. In a few minutes, you're gonna know more about God than I do, or anybody else here does. It's okay.
So no trivia night with Mussolini for this guy. Then like a rock concert happens. Yeah, we love the Lord, but it doesn't mean that we can't still rock out.
God's not dead, he's surely alive. He's living on the inside, rolling like a lion. God's not dead, he's surely alive.
This movie was just insufferable, frankly. It's set in the fantasy world that some really hardcore Christians are convinced they live in, where Christians are like this ultra-oppressed group that everyone hates and is out to get. And also, every person that isn't a Christian, not just atheists, but people of all other religions, aren't just across-the-board assholes, but will certainly go to hell if they don't change their ways. I think most Christians would even agree that this is absolute garbage. How anyone was able to convince themselves that this was something worth watching is genuinely beyond me. 1 out of 10. 19. The Black Rider, Revelation Road.
You still in one piece?
Set a few years after Revelation Road 2, David has become a Mad Max-esque do-gooder across the post-rapture dystopia known as the Black Rider. And he's wearing a lot of layers for how sunny it looks outside. Like, I know it looks cool, the fit does go hard, but aren't you hot, bro? And honestly, if you ignore the Christian stuff, which is sparse enough here that I'm able to, it is, again, just really cute how this is obviously David's self-insert Mad Max fan fiction.
You're a good man. I almost forgot what one looked like. You might be the last one on Earth.
Like, the guy she's saying that about wrote the movie. Also, this movie ends in a cliffhanger, apparently for the story to continue in a Revelation Road TV series.
Over 2,000 years, arranging events for such a time as this.
But unfortunately, that series isn't out yet, so to my complete and utter devastation, I won't be able to watch it for this video. So funny, 6 out of 10.
You're 20?
Yeah.
It's okay, no one has to know, baby girl.
And you know what? Maga! I don't need relationship advice from someone. Some Maga!
Okay, so this one follows a guy named John Paul George. Yes, after the Beatles. They bring it up a lot.
My name is John Paul George.
Like the Beatles?
Yeah, like the Beatles.
Who's engaged to Candace Cameron Bure from Full House. And they make sure to tell you that they are not living together yet.
By the time we're married next month and I move in here, I'll have perfected 10 meals.
That's one of the crazier things to me that's normalized among Christian fundamentalists. Not living together until after you're married. Like, what if she doesn't let me put my Fight Club poster up in the living room? But John Paul tracks down David A.R. White's character, who's like a hillbilly hermit, because their deceased fathers were in the military together, where one converted the other to Christianity. And as the sons go on a road trip together to this war memorial, the same thing happens. So David's playing more of a character this time, a disgruntled non-believer with a southern accent.
All right, I'll make you a deal. I'll let you read one. You like it? We move on. Deal stands.
And maybe it's just because at this point I had watched 19 other movies where he played characters much more similar to himself that I had trouble seeing this as anything but a performance. But there's this part where John Paul is like glazing Christianity and David's character blows up on him.
These beat around the bush games, asking me questions about God so you can eventually Bible bash me to death and tell me I'm a terrible person and I'm going to hell. Also, you can feel like you've done your saintly duty by destroying one of Satan's minions. Also, you can secure yourself a nice little place in heaven.
And I couldn't help but wonder that if while reading, memorizing, and performing that little speech, if David ever once thought, wait a minute, is it possible that this might be how some people feel while watching my movies? Probably not though, because he kept making them. Oh, also Stephen Baldwin was in this one too. 3 out of 10, really boring. 21, God's Not Dead 2, Electric Boogaloo. I'm running out of funny ways to say these titles.
That's the thing about atheism. It doesn't take away the pain, it just takes away the hope.
Guys, this one might be even worse than the first God's Not Dead. So this one stars Melissa Joan Hart, who is a Christian high school history teacher that briefly quotes Jesus in a lecture.
Isn't that sort of like what Jesus meant when he said that we should love our enemies?
Yes. The writer of the Gospel of Matthew records Jesus as saying, "You have heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you will be children of your Father in heaven," which indicates a commitment to nonviolence.
And the parents of the student she was talking to are convinced by this evil atheist lawyer.
We're going to prove once and for all that God is dead.
To sue the teacher for violating the separation of church and state. Then the rest of the movie is a courtroom drama that honestly, David A.R. White's character is little more than a supporting character in. So the argument probably could have been made that I didn't need to watch this one for the video, but I did, so I'm gonna talk about it. So the interesting thing about this one is that I actually agree with the movie that the teacher wasn't doing anything wrong by quoting Jesus in her lecture. And I think most people would agree, but similar to the first God's Not Dead, this is set in a fantasy world where Christians are the most oppressed group in America.
And your answer incorporated specific, detailed reference to those teachings that included Scripture itself, the words of Jesus.
Yes.
What were you thinking, Grace?
So something as innocuous as what she did becomes like the biggest deal in the country. Now, in the credits, they actually list several real-life legal cases that inspired this movie's plot. But if you select any one of them and actually research it, you'll find that it's not actually comparable to what happens in the film at all. What also bothers me is I'm just positive that if a teacher were being sued for quoting the Quran or mentioning trans people in a classroom, the people that made this movie would probably be completely in favor of it. But in addition to perpetuating this oppression fantasy that so many Christians are buying into, This movie is also just weird. Like, the girl whose parents are suing the teacher has an arc of her coming to Christianity after discovering that her recently deceased brother was secretly a Christian. And it, like, comforts her knowing he's in heaven.
There are more than 5 minutes awaiting you and your brother. John chapter 11, verse 25 to 26 says, "Whoever lives and believes in me will never die." Do you believe this?
I do.
But it got me thinking, how would followers of this movie's version of Christianity go about comforting this girl if her dead brother wasn't a Christian? Because in their eyes, that means he's in hell. What do you say to somebody who's grieving a person you believe to be in hell? This movie also has strong debate lord energy at times. Like, at a certain point during the trial, they decide to really lean into the Jesus as a historical figure argument and bring in experts on the historical Jesus to testify. But they're not actors playing experts, they're just real-life experts playing themselves.
My name is James Warner Wallace. I'm a retired homicide detective from Los Angeles County.
And are you the author of the book Cold Case Christianity?
Yes, I am.
So the movie basically just stops dead in its tracks to give you a couple TED Talks convincing you that Jesus was real.
After years of scrutinizing these Gospels, using the template that I use to determine if an eyewitness is reliable, I concluded that the 4 Gospels in this book contain the reliable accounts of the actual words of Jesus.
I guess I should talk about David's subplot in this movie, which is that what pastors talk about in sermons is starting to be monitored by the state, so he's asked to submit the transcripts of his sermons, which he views as like a major attack on his freedoms.
If we stand by and do nothing, pressure that we're feeling today is going to mean persecution tomorrow. Whether we admit it or not, we're at war. The war of Ephesians 6. Not against flesh and blood, but against the powers of this world, against the spiritual forces in the heavenly realms. And if we insist on denying that, then we've already lost.
And when he tells this to, like, the official transcript collector, the guy says,
"Are you sure you want to do that?"
Something that I have to do.
You know the old saying, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, don't you? I have another saying. A nail that sticks up gets hammered down.
oh my god, dude. What else? There's this comic relief character played by the guy who was his best friend in Me Again. In the first God's Not Dead, he owned a car rental business. Then in this one, he's a waiter.
You're from Blaze's car rental, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that gig didn't really work out for me. I don't think customer service is my forte.
So you decided to become a waiter?
Well, this is where I do my dinner theater. In the mornings, I serve up croissants. In the evenings, I serve up Chekhov.
Oh.
And I just wanted on record that while watching this movie, I made the prediction that by the end of the God's Not Dead saga, this character who keeps briefly popping up in David's life at important moments is going to be revealed as an angel. I'm calling it now. Also, I should give the movie credit. The lawyer in this movie representing Melissa Joan Hart is stated to not be a Christian.
Are you a believer?
You mean a Christian? No.
But is still depicted as ultimately a nice guy that wants to do the right thing. And they don't even hint at him being converted at the end. Honestly, baffled they were able to practice that level of restraint. Still, this was overall horrendous. 2 out of 10. 22, God's Not Dead, A Light in Darkness.
Stretchy! Wow.
So, twist of the century. The third God's Not Dead movie is a vast improvement over the first two. I'd go as far as to say it's watchable and may at times even qualify as good? I know, I was surprised as you are, but hear me out. This one isn't super heavy on plot. An accident causes David's church to catch fire, resulting in the death of his black friend before it burns down completely. I just realized I forgot to mention that in the first two God's Not Dead movies, David has yet another black best friend, but he's dead in this one, so don't worry about it. And then the college campus the church is located on doesn't want to pay to rebuild it because they think God's dead or whatever. So David reconnects with his estranged lawyer brother played by John Corbett.
God called me to fight. I'm gonna fight.
God calls you, you call me.
a real actor who's been in things other than Christian movies, who I think might turn in the single best performance of any of these movies I had to watch, which is probably helped by the fact that his character is pretty well written.
Unfortunately, I don't really eat zingers anymore.
What do you mean you don't eat zingers? You love those things. What happened?
Triple bypass.
Heart surgery? You had heart surgery.
6 years ago.
I had no idea.
Why would you?
See, when David's character was a kid, the brother was excommunicated by the family for questioning his faith, and watching them reconnect is unironically really engaging because they missed each other and enjoy getting to spend time together again.
Did you believe him?
Of course I believed him. I was 7 years old. I believed whatever he told me. Dave, you can make your own 7-Up. All you need is just water and salt.
But there's also a lot of unresolved tension in regards to how Corbett feels about being essentially disowned, and it's actually discussed in a very realistic, nuanced way, which you should know by now is rare for these movies.
You forgave me. For what exactly? For leaving? You forced me out, you and Mom and Dad, all of you.
Break. No one forced you out.
Oh, yes, you did. I wasn't welcome in this house once I started asking tough questions.
Is that what they were? Tough questions? Oh, why did God allow bad things to happen to good people? Or how do we even know God exists? Really?
You should back off, little brother.
Maybe you were just trying to impress a co-ed with how worldly and forward-thinking you were. Do you have any idea what you did to Mom and Dad? You broke their hearts.
You're the one that broke my heart. You really don't get that, do you? You didn't take the time to understand what I was going through. I was trying to sort out my own faith, my own sense of God. I was changing, and you all hated me for it, and that's the truth, David.
He also doesn't completely apologize and reconvert to Christianity by the end, which was refreshing. But they couldn't resist having one shot of him opening a Bible at the end, hinting that his soul might not actually be condemned to an eternity of suffering after all. This movie also looks very professional, not like in a TV movie way, but actually like something that came out in theaters, especially in this one scene where David's surveying the aftermath of the fire. Also, the main guy from God's Not Dead 1, Josh, played by Shane Harper, who I mentioned also played Spencer in the Disney show Good Luck Charlie. Well, he's in this one too, but so is Samantha Boscarino, who played Skylar, the girl Spencer cheated on Teddy with in Good Luck Charlie, if anyone else cares about that. She's also very pretty. Her character's subplot wasn't too interesting, but there's one point where she says to David the line,
You want to know why our generation's leaving the church? It's because the whole world knows what the church is against, but it's getting harder and harder to know what it's for.
That's an actual criticism of the church, something you almost never hear in these movies. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't like one of my new favorite movies or anything. I'll probably never watch it again. But it is easily the best thing in David A.R. White's entire filmography, so for that, 8 out of 10. 23, like, man. So I'm gonna describe the plot of this one as if I'm David A.R. White pitching it to the studio. So last night I was watching John Wick and I was thinking we should make a movie exactly like that. Except it stars me, and I'm the master hitman that gets to dress in cool suits and carry a big gun and kill a bunch of people because a cult leader played by William Baldwin kidnapped my adopted daughter. And I'm also a pastor. Honestly, it even sounds like he's doing a Keanu Reeves impression in certain scenes.
You'd give him up that easy. I don't buy it. You think this gets you off the hook?
This is to John Wick what Revelation Road is to Mad Max. And again, it is just kind of cute knowing you're watching this guy getting to live out his fantasies on screen, but that doesn't make it a good movie, so 4 out of 10.
24.
Look, I understand your position. You feel that you're making a last-ditch stand for your faith. And you've chosen this as a hill that you're willing to die on.
Our whole faith started because one man chose a hill he was willing to die on.
So any goodwill earned with me by the third God's Not Dead movie, completely destroyed by the fourth. This one's, Oof. Also, I'm aware that YouTube creator Big Joel also recently did a video on the last two God's Not Dead movies. Just wanted to say I did not watch his video on the off chance that some of our observations on these movies are similar. I probably didn't need to say that. I think that H Bomber Guy video on plagiarism just made me paranoid. So this one tells the story of a Christian couple that homeschools their kids using a curriculum that focuses heavily on the Bible. And when a social services rep observes their teaching and decides it doesn't comply with federal education standards.
So the takeaway, their teachable moment from the no myth, is obey God or die.
I mean, that's one way to look at it.
Uh-huh. These are my recommendations to the state.
They refuse to change their curriculum, leading to another legal drama. One where David testifies for them or something. So the whole theme of this movie is that in America, the right to homeschool your kids is supposedly under attack. But like, that's not even what happens in this plot that they made up. Because the family would have been allowed to continue homeschooling their kids if they just adjusted the curriculum to comply with federal standards. But I guess they just couldn't bring themselves to replace their daily Noah's Ark retelling with some algebra.
We could certainly adjust the curriculum to be more accommodating.
Don't you mean compromise the curriculum? We already told them we're not conforming.
Religion has been removed from our schools. They're teaching kids that they don't need God.
Overall, this movie is pretty much arguing not just that you should be able to homeschool your kids, but that you should be able to do so without having to meet any sort of educational standards. Just that whatever the individual parent thinks is important for their kid to learn is good enough. So like, this is my opinion on homeschooling, okay? I don't think it should be illegal because I do believe there are times where it might be the best move for a specific child's situation. Like when a child has a physical or mental health problem, which to be fair is one of the situations mentioned in this movie.
Jackson wouldn't last 10 minutes in a public school. They'd classify him as special education and label him emotionally disturbed. They'd give him an individual education plan which might not even challenge him at all until eventually Jackson becomes the label the state pins on him, and why his father died, I feel like would all be for nothing.
But it seems to me, at least in America, that most parents' motivation for wanting to homeschool their kids is basically because they're afraid of their kids being exposed to facts that they don't believe in. Whether it's the existence of queer people, evolution, or racism in America, there are parents so afraid of their children learning about these true things that they're willing to deny them a normal social life in exchange for shielding them from it all. Now, this isn't an opinion I feel super strongly about. I could be wrong, but that does seem to be like the leading motivation to me, and I think for that reason, for most kids, being taught by someone other than their parents is probably ideal. But this movie disagrees because public school is a dangerous place where second graders are given advertisements for birth control.
Maddie Anderson brought that home from school.
This is an advertisement for birth control.
Yeah. They passed it out in class. Maddie's in the 2nd grade. He's 7.
Now, I looked it up, and apparently this is based on a real incident that happened at an elementary school, but the movie's kind of mischaracterizing what happened by saying it was an advertisement for birth control. It was an advertisement for a health clinic that they didn't notice mentioned birth control as just something they offered. But the way this movie describes it is like the kids were given flyers for Trojan condoms or something. And like, why would a child hearing about birth control even be that big of a deal? Children hearing about something adult before they can fully comprehend it is just an inevitable part of life, and any parent who thinks they can keep that from happening at all is delusional. I can't help but think of the story of the Buddha, who was a prince that spent his whole childhood sheltered from negativity, only to be overwhelmed when he learned all of life's harsh truths at once. But what am I thinking? Trying to get to these people with a story from a religion other than Christianity? Kill it with fire. Another spooky thing this movie is worried about children learning at public school? History.
Ask your average millennial about our founding fathers, and they'll tell you that they were all a bunch of old and rich oppressive slave owners.
But weren't they?
Most of them were just kids. Edward Rutledge and Thomas Lynch both were just 26 years old when they signed the Declaration of Independence. And Thomas Jefferson was the ripe old age of 33 when he helped write it.
Listen, there might be some good arguments out there as to why some of the founding fathers owning slaves didn't make them racists, But this is not one of them.
And they were just 26 to 30 years old, mere babies. How are they supposed to know that owning another human being was wrong?
I sounded like the Beastie Boys there. Also, the fact that they have the black guy be the one to explain this, so it seems extra okay. So lame. But I don't want to have to reckon with my country's complicated past. That sounds really hard. Other reasons this movie gives for why homeschooling is the way to go are that certain schools require vaccinations.
Medical freedom. I want to be able to choose which immunizations my children receive.
And then there's even a brief mention at the end of public schools redefining biology.
Because what you call teaching, Mr. Chairman, is really social engineering.
You are out of order, Mr. Hill.
History is being rewritten. Biology is redefined, and right and wrong are erased.
God, they couldn't resist slipping in a little subtle transphobia, could they? There's a subplot where the couple's also homeschooled teenage son meets a girl that goes to public school and gets to take her to prom. But before he meets her, he expresses that he's having trouble meeting other kids his age.
What do you think of this car? That's freedom right there. The chance to hang with people my own age.
So the movie's admitting that if he hadn't by chance met this girl, he would have no social life as a result of being homeschooled. There's a funny scene where he's talking to the girl and just glazing homeschooling to high heaven.
No, there's no pressure to be popular, I guess. No bullies, no school lockdowns. But I don't know, I guess the best part is I just get to be myself, you know? My thoughts are my own, not what I memorized. Yeah, I learn stuff and make it matter to me.
Yeah, the curriculum that my parents are currently in legal trouble for not making thorough enough makes me more of a free thinker, I guess. Also, dude, what are you doing telling this girl that her education experience is the inferior one? If I were her, that would come across really condescending. What else? There's this scene where two characters from the previous movies talk about their families disowning them for being Christian.
They still won't speak to me now that I'm a Christian.
My family lives down the street and my father won't talk to me. I don't think that Christianity could be so...
Lonely?
I'm positive that statistically, more people have been disowned by their families for not being Christian than vice versa. This whole thing was just dog shit, man. The audacity to act like parents wanting to homeschool their kids are such an oppressed group in this country that it's worth making an entire movie about? Fuck you. 0 out of 10.
Hey, Patrick.
What?
I thought of something funnier than 24.
Let me hear it.
25.
I completely messed up.
How's that?
I'm not supposed to have a crush on my assignment.
Oh. Oh. It happens.
So I'm sorry, but I have absolutely nothing of substance to say about the action romantic comedy Love on the Rock. Throughout its hour-and-a-half-long runtime, I took a grand total of 2 notes. One about how there's a character named Luigi.
I don't know anything about an accident.
The one involving Luigi Santini.
I guess in the hopes that I could tie that into some witty reference to Luigi Mangione, but I couldn't. And the second note was just that, like The Moment After 2 and Beckman, this one ends in a post-credit scene setting up a sequel that will inevitably never happen.
You enjoy your vacation while you can, because there is no sanctuary, no safe harbor. That serum is mine.
That's the extent of anything I could possibly say about this movie. For some reason, I rated it 5 out of 10. But because we're so far into this video that I think most people who have watched this long will probably finish it, I was hoping I could take this time to talk about a movie that I actually unironically love, if that's okay with you. I think I've earned it, and I think the movie I'm gonna go with is When Harry Met Sally. It's very telling to me how in the 36 years since the release of When Harry Met Sally, so many rom-coms have tried to recapture its magic, and in my opinion, not one of them has fully succeeded. Every time I rewatch this movie, I find myself baffled how, in a short 90 minutes, it manages to authentically simulate what it feels like to fall in love. And unlike many other rom-coms, I feel Harry and Sally's love story is a realistic one, in that it's messy. The first 2 times they meet each other are years apart, and they don't even like each other. It's not until the 3rd time they meet that they become friends, in what, to me, is one of the most genius, wholesome moments in the movie.
Yeah, well, what are you gonna do? What happened with you guys?
When Joe and I started seeing each other, we wanted exactly the same thing.
Like, an interaction that started as an awkward bookstore catch-up between 2 people that aren't necessarily even fond of each other was pleasant enough to turn into them getting coffee together. And the moment where they decide to go to a secondary location together happens off-screen. I love it. Also, they're realistically not each other's first love. Both were in prior relationships with people they thought would be their forever person, only for those to fall apart and them find each other later in life. I know my perspective is limited as a man, but it seems to me, and I've heard from women, that both sides of a typical heterosexual relationship are represented well here. And I think that can be attributed to this being a collaboration between men like Billy Crystal and director Rob Reiner, but also women like Meg Ryan and screenwriter Nora Ephron. This has also just aged really well compared to other rom-coms. Or you could say it hasn't really aged at all, aside from aesthetic things that just make the movie of its time in a charming way. One thing I guess you could criticize is that early on, this movie presents the argument of whether men and women can be friends without sex getting in the way.
Because no man can be friends with a woman that he finds attractive. He always wants to have sex with her.
So you're saying that a man can be friends with a woman he finds unattractive?
No, you pretty much want to nail him too.
And the fact that Harry and Sally end up together romantically could imply that the answer to that question is no, they can't, which obviously isn't true. But I don't think the movie's necessarily saying that, just that in Harry and Sally's case, they couldn't. The supporting cast is also unmatched, especially the late Bruno Kirby and Carrie Fisher as Harry's friend Jess and Sally's friend Marie. One detail I always loved is how in the first scene with the 4 of them, Harry's hoping to set up Sally with Jess while Sally's hoping for Harry with Marie. And hilariously, while it turns out there's no chemistry where they hoped it would be,
Let's just say I'm really just not a big fan of Jimmy Presence.
Well, he's the reason I became a writer, but that's not important.
Jess and Marie actually end up being perfect for each other.
Restaurants are to people in the 80s what theater was to people in the 60s. I read that in a magazine.
I wrote that.
Get out of here.
No, I did. I wrote that.
I've never quoted anything from a magazine in my life. That's amazing. Don't you think that's amazing? And you wrote it?
So later at the end of the movie, after years of being friends with the 2 of them as a couple, we see that Sally and Jess still become friends despite having no chemistry on their original date.
I'm going.
It's almost midnight.
Well, the thought of not kissing somebody is just...
I'll kiss you. Come on, stay, please.
Thanks, Jess. I have to go.
A small detail, but I've always loved it. I feel like I haven't talked enough about the comedy in this movie because it's a famous comedy. Of course it's funny, even beyond the iconic deli orgasm scene.
And it's not the same for men. Charlie Chaplin had babies when he was 73.
Yeah, but he was too old to pick them up.
But again, realistically funny, in the way that a bunch of intelligent, witty people would believably be.
Baby fish mouth! Baby fish mouth!
That's it. Time's up.
Baby talk.
Baby talk? What's that? That's not a saying.
Oh, but baby fish mouth is sweeping the nation. I hear them talking.
This is also a fantastic New York movie with scenes in, of course, Cat's Deli, then also the Met, Central Park, Yankee Stadium. I could simply sing this movie's praises until the end of time. Endlessly rewatchable, makes you believe that love is real. What else could you possibly ask for in a piece of art? Easily a 10 out of 10. Thank you so much for indulging me. That was fun, but now, regrettably, we have to move on to 26 Nothing is impossible. Well, nothing except watching 26 David A.R. White movies without inflicting permanent mental damage on oneself. I don't know, man. He's a former high school star athlete turned janitor who, in his middle age, resurrects not only his basketball career from high school, but also his romance. Only noteworthy things about this one were that David's character's name is Scott.
Hey, Scott. How you doing, my friend?
We started this journey with him saying, hey Scotty, and now he has become Scotty. Scotty, like a melody in my head. Also, this one features actor Robert Amaya as David's friend.
What? How many times have you flunked out of seminary school?
3. Okay, 4, all right? But that last one did not count. It was online. It's not like they expelled me. They just removed my user ID and password.
Who was also in A Taste of Praise, a Christian movie I looked at in a previous video. There's a part where a character is video called for something that 100% could have been a text.
Miss Aikens, Archie's looking for you.
I have to go.
And on this movie's IMDb trivia page, it reads, David A.R. White plays a 39-year-old, but he was in his early 50s when this movie was filmed and released, and God, does that sound like he wrote it. Thanks to his beautiful head of golden hair, he can easily play a character 11 years his junior without anyone questioning it. 4 out of 10, I guess. 27, God's Not Dead 5, In God We Trust. Here we are, at the end of this journey, with the 5th God's Not Dead film. That's right, there are 5 of these fucking things. We got God's Not Dead 5 before GTA 6. But before I explain to you exactly what goes down in David A.R. White's most recent cinematic outing, I wanted to point out that this was released in September of 2024. And the movie ends with the statistic that 40 million Christians don't vote, urging the audience to let their voice be heard. So the main goal of this movie was to get its viewers to vote for Trump, right? We don't have to pretend like we don't know that's the outcome they were hoping for and somehow got. Was this movie actually really popular or something? So as I describe the plot of this to you, just keep that in mind, that its goal is to get you to vote for Trump. So bad news. The evil atheist lawyer from God's Not Dead 2, Peter Kane, well, he's back and running for Congress, unopposed after his opponent died. But what are his goals after being elected? Keeping religion out of government.
I have always said that religious superstition has no place in influencing our laws and government. So, here's to enlightenment, reason, and reshaping our nation's core.
It's funny, most of what this guy says is obviously framed as evil by the movie, but if you can ignore the fact that such a nefarious looking and sounding guy is saying it, most of it sounds pretty reasonable. Like, religious superstition has no place influencing our laws or government. Sounds pretty bad, but if I think about it, I agree. Religious superstition has no place influencing our laws or government. We're then again treated to David's harrowing speech from the end of God's Not Dead 4, interspliced with speeches from past American presidents.
Don't let our sacrifice be in vain.
In the long history of the world.
And during this little montage, while being told our freedoms are getting taken away, we are shown imagery of masks, vaccine needles, and churches closing.
You're chipping away at our freedoms and liberties because it's all about power for you. And the only way that you can get more power is by taking it from someone else.
I love how Republicans always say that the political left is too sensitive and full of wimps, when after they were asked politely, out of courtesy, to just wear masks and get vaccinated to keep people from dying, they haven't stopped bitching and moaning about it, even 3 years after we stopped asking them to fucking do it. Oh, also in the montage, evolution is shown being written on a chalkboard. How far into this movie are we? 3 minutes? 3 out of 97. Cool. But this election is apparently really important because it'll cause the House of Representatives to flip.
We're fried. Got no time to recruit, no time to vet. If the House flips, hello socialism.
Oh my god, I wish it was that easy. But because David's speech went viral, of course it did. Political consultant Lottie J is brought on to recruit him to run against Kane.
Lottie J.
Political consultant. David Hill. Fresh out of business cards.
But Lottie is motivated by revenge because she has a mysterious past with Kane's consultant, played by Scott Baio.
Carlotta J. What a coincidence.
John, hello?
Who, when he was a kid, starred in this hilarious anti-weed movie that I talked about in a previous video.
Do you know how long and how hard I've trained for this meet? I'm sorry. And it's all over because you were stoned.
Despite some initial hesitance, after realizing he may be America's last hope of not becoming a godless, socialist dystopia, David agrees to run, and soon after, he meets the waiter from the first two movies.
Don't I know you?
Well, it's quite possible. I'm actually a fairly successful stage actor.
Yeah. No, you're a waiter.
Well, that too.
He's gonna be an angel. I just know it. David and Kane have a debate where, again, despite the evil delivery, most of what Kane says sounds pretty reasonable to me.
This country should be run by scholars and academics, not by people who are afraid of a boogeyman. This man, he could not represent the electorate in a level-headed, rational, impartial manner. And on a personal note, I find your moral superiority and smugness offensive. Who died and left you arbiter of right and wrong?
But he shuts David down, leading Lottie to accept funding from this sleazy business guy played by Dean Cain, who was in the first movie that I didn't mention. And just one little compliment to break things up, there's a really clever shot here after Lottie says this to David.
What does he want in return?
What anyone with money wants.
More money?
Without it, there's zero chance of winning. So what do you say? Spend a little bit of money on a celebratory dinner tonight, or make our way down to the emergency ward.
Emergency ward?
Or your campaign's on life support.
Huh.
And then it cuts to this shot, which looks like an emergency ward, but is really just a restaurant. Cute, clever little visual there. Anyway, back to the worst shit you've ever seen. David continues to campaign and his approval rating grows, leading to another debate with Kane, where David, this movie's hero, argues against free healthcare.
Well, yes, I think that healthcare is a right and not a privilege. We depend on government action to provide it universally.
And pile on more debt. Senator, we need solutions that empower people, not bankrupt our country.
You don't know anything about the debt.
Do these people really think that Jesus would be against free healthcare? Did I miss a part in the Bible where before healing a man of leprosy, Jesus asked the guy if he was insured? We learn that Lottie has a son back home who's being watched by her sister, played by Andrea Logan White.
Look, I know you think you're going to accomplish something by being there. Like, you're gonna find some kind of closure that will let you move on with your life. But your life's here, Lottie.
Now, to my knowledge, this is the first movie that she's featured in since her and David's divorce. So it's nice to know they're still on good enough terms to be in a movie together. Never in the same scene, though. Okay, so some kind of convoluted plot stuff then happens. Lottie is given dirt on Kane that he once served 6 months in prison for money laundering. And naturally, she wants to leak this info because nobody in their right mind would vote for somebody they know is a convicted felon. But David, not wanting to play dirty, says no to leaking it. Lottie, however, determined to get revenge on Baio, goes behind his back and does it anyway. But it turned out to all be a setup by Baio. The intel was false, so David and his campaign are made to look like liars.
The documents that Mr. Hill released to the press, that released to you, were all forgeries. They were forged.
And after they pull this off, Kane says,
I mean, it was a brilliant plan, executed perfectly. I'm only disappointed that I won't get a chance to debate him and strike the death blow myself.
Which he also said at the beginning of the movie about his previous opponent that died.
Oh, I wish I could have debated West. I could have struck the death blow myself.
So I guess that's a little catchphrase he's trying to get going for himself, and I just think that's cute. Not only does David's approval rating plummet as a result of this scandal, but he's also let go as a pastor. But figuring he has nothing left to lose, he decides to stay in the race, defending Lottie's actions by saying,
Our political system is broken. It encourages good people to do bad things.
and it's up to us to fix it.
Which I'm pretty sure is this movie's blanket defense of everything shady that Trump and other Republican politicians have done. And it got me thinking how weird it is that David is the character running for Congress in this movie that wants us to vote for Trump. I mean, I guess they have similar political beliefs, but Pastor Dave is always outwardly a very polite and humble guy. If they really wanted him to represent Trump, they could have at least had him hit on girls half his age a couple times. Maybe given him a past with a shady billionaire named Jeffrey Jepstein. That night, Lottie comes to apologize, and we learn the reason she wanted revenge on Bayo so bad is because he impregnated her, and when she refused to get an abortion, abandoned her and their son.
When I told John I was pregnant, he told me to take care of it. And so I did. I've been taking care of our son Christopher ever since.
Something a Christian man has never done. And then they have a conversation that I think genuinely brings up some interesting questions about God, destiny, and signs from the universe.
But sometimes knowing it's God is easier than actually listening to him.
Well, why wouldn't you listen to God if you knew it was him?
For most folks, it's fear, afraid to fail, afraid to take a chance. But sooner or later, we all get hit by that storm. Our first thought is, stay in the boat, even though it's sinking. It doesn't make any sense, but we hang on because it's what we know. And what's out there is terrifying.
See, all that stuff is the aspect of religion that I'm most interested in and think actually is worth pondering. But they kind of botch it at the end by making it specific to Christianity.
But then Jesus walks across the water, and he reaches out his hand. And he says,
I have come.
Cain agrees to a final debate against David. So in the way that everything Cain says sounds pretty reasonable if the movie didn't frame it as so evil, a lot of what David says sounds pretty insane if you ignore the movie trying to frame it as heroic.
The only reason Jesus' teachings of love thy neighbor resonates is because he was the Son of God, the creator of the universe. Without that minor detail, Jesus would just be another false prophet. What you're trying to do is remove God from our schools, our culture, our government, and even our history.
Like, if somebody was yelling this exact speech word for word on a city street corner, I'm pretty sure most people would cross the street to avoid them. And he, of course, wins the election and I'm assuming is able to turn America into a Christian theocracy, which is a good thing. Funny to think that since God is obviously canonically real in the God's Not Dead universe, that would also mean that David is canonically God's earthly vessel to enact change in a movie that he produced. David produced the movie, not God, though I guess he technically did too. That'd be so funny if they gave God a producer credit on all these movies. Or I guess he's like executive producer. Also, the waiter guy never turned out to be an angel. He's just some guy. Damn it, I really thought I cooked with that theory. From a moral standpoint, it was probably the most offensive one, but it was also so batshit that I was kind of entertained, so 6 out of 10. So, that was it. I still can't believe that I have even the partial memories of 27 different David A.R. White movies floating around up here. If I had like Inside Out characters, I bet they would have completely given up on me by now. I mean, I have been feeling kind of void of emotion since starting this whole thing. But at the end of this whole experiment, I feel I've learned a lot about David A.R. White the man, and honestly, it's not all negative. For instance, I think it's pretty clear that he really loves his kids, and at least at one point really loved his ex-wife. And I also sincerely believe that him and I share a love for the art form of cinema. I mean, as bad as most of his movies are, he's made 27 more of them than I probably ever will, and I think that's commendable. He had a dream and made it happen, I gotta respect that. And I think that he likes black guys, as long as they're never more than a supporting character. I also suspect that he's probably polite to everyone he meets regardless of their beliefs. All that being said, I think it's also clear that David isn't the biggest fan of Muslim people. They that he doesn't think women should get abortions or that people should practice homosexuality. I think he believes that anyone who dies without accepting Christ into their hearts has a pretty good chance of going to hell, and that the nation of Israel has his undying support regardless of what they do. And I'm certain that he believes the Bible's end time prophecies are going to happen, during which, thanks to his lifelong ministry, he will surely get raptured. So needless to say, I don't think I like David A.R. White very much, but weirdly, I think I'd still want to talk to him if given the chance. Who knows, maybe in a one-on-one conversation with him, he'd manage to do what 27 of his movies failed to, and convert me to Christianity. So he better hurry up and contact me in case the rapture happens soon.
Hey, Justice, I know this sounds crazy, but like, I've been reading the Bible, and like, it's got a lot to say.
Jesus, man.